This is Nick with logosbynick.com, and in today's tutorial I'll be demonstrating how you can create this circular ribbon sort of design using Inkscape. And at any point in this tutorial you could look down at the bottom left hand side of my screen to see which mouse clicks and keystrokes I'm using. So let me minimize this and I'll get started here on Inkscape. And by the way, if you'd like to know how you can make Inkscape appear darkened with these custom icons, a link to that information will be in the description of the video. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is make sure our view is set to custom, and we'll zoom in at 1:1. We'll open up the Align and Distribute menu with this button up here, and we're going to want Last Selected chosen from that drop down, and then we'll open up the Edit Objects, Colors, Gradients, and Stroke dialog with that button right there. And what we're going to do now is we're going to come up here to where it says Effect, and make sure you have this very last box turned off. We don't want that on. We should make sure it's off like that. And what we'll do now is we're going to grab the Circles and Ellipses tool and hold Control and Shift in the keyboard and click and drag to create an ellipse. Not an ellipse, a perfectly round circle like that. And let me grab the arrow, the Select tool, and position this over to the center of the page. And I'm going to give this an outline, a red outline, by holding Shift and clicking on the color red. And it's going to give it a red outline like that. And I'll come over to actually, let's stay on the Fill tab. Let's click the button. Let's click the X button to get rid of the black fill so there's no fill in there. And we'll come over to the Stroke Style tab, and I'm going to change the width of this stroke to 40 pixels. So whatever is in there for you, just erase that and write 40, hit enter. Like that, that's pretty good. And I'll take the opacity and bring this down about in half. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come up here to where this lock icon is and turn that on. And I'm just going to make sure that the width of this is 300. So I'm just going to erase that, hit 300 and hit enter. And then it should be 300 by 300, and it should be a 40 pixel stroke. So that's where we want to start out with. What I want to do now is duplicate this by hitting Control D on the keyboard. And I'm going to take that duplicated copy and turn that blue by holding Shift and clicking on the color blue. And then I'll hold Control and Shift on the keyboard and grab one of these arrows and just pull this out. Scale it up about that much, and that's pretty good. We want this to be just a little bit bigger than the red ring beneath it. And once we've done that, let's take this blue copy and duplicate that again. Let's just hit Control D on the keyboard and just hold Control and just click and drag this off to the left for now. We're just going to leave that there and come back to that in a little while. So let's click and drag over these two rings right here and convert them from a stroke into a path by going to Path, Stroke to Path. And what we'll do now is I'm going to grab the squares and rectangles tool and just click and drag and create a little rectangle going over the bottom here. But I'm going to make that green, and I'm going to get rid of that outline by holding Shift and clicking on the X down here. That's pretty good. Go back to the Select tool. I'm just going to position this right about there. Maybe I'll make this a little wider. For the width, I'm going to go with about 88, so that's pretty good, 88. Hold Shift, click on the blue ring, and just center it on the vertical axis. And then click off of it to deselect. And then click on just this green rectangle. Hit Control D on the keyboard to duplicate that. And I'll make this one black. And I'll scale that in about that much. And I'll pull this side in about that much. Maybe a little more, so that the width of that is about 56. And then we can hold Shift, click on the blue ring, make sure it's centered on the vertical axis, click off of it to deselect everything. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click and drag over those two rectangles we just created. And I'm going to duplicate them by hitting Control D on the keyboard. And then I'll click this button up here, rotate selection 90 degrees, clockwise or counterclockwise, either one. Get the same result either way. And I'm going to put these ones up here. And then I'm going to hold Shift and click on that blue ring and just make sure they're centered on the horizontal axis. And then we can click off it to deselect everything. So let's click on this black rectangle and then hold Shift and click on that black rectangle. And let's unify them together by going to Path, Union. And then I'm going to hold Shift in the keyboard and click on the blue ring and go to Path, Difference. And then I'm going to click on this green rectangle, hold shift, click on that green rectangle, and unify them together by going to Path, Union, and then hold shift on the keyboard and click on the red ring, so we have them both selected, and go to Path, Intersection. So you can see the beginning of what we're doing here. If you notice here, it's kind of like this ribbon is kind of like it's got a fold or a crease in it. That's what we're starting out with right here. So let's click and drag over that whole thing and click it on it again to get the rotation handles, and just hold Control on the keyboard and just rotate this around until it's sitting upright like that. And then we can click off of that to deselect. I want to get rid of this top portion of the ribbon right here. If you notice, there's no top portion in there. So to get rid of that, I'm just going to create a square. Just hold Control and Shift and click and drag on the keyboard to create a square. Go back to the Select tool, click on it a second time to get the rotation handles, and just hold Control on the keyboard and rotate it around about that much. Put this right up there. That's pretty good. I'll hold Shift and click on the blue object and go to Path, Difference. And now the next step would be to put the little fold marks in there. So let's zoom in on this over here. Let's just press plus on the keyboard a few times to zoom in. And we'll grab the Bezier pen, which is right here, or just press B on the keyboard. And for this, we're going to turn on the Snap to Cusp Nodes, and then snap the cursor onto that corner, and click. Hold Control and just drag this line straight across, not straight, but going parallel with the edge of the red shape, and then click. Then let go of Control, snap to the corner of the blue, click, and then back to the starting point, click. And then we can turn that green. We can get rid of the stroke by holding Shift and clicking on the X. And let's bring the opacity of that down a little bit, about in half as well. Let me go back to the Select tool. Let's take that object. We can now put this object on these other three corners right here. So let's just duplicate that by hitting Control D. And we'll flip that horizontally. And then click it again to get the rotation handles. And just hold Control and just rotate this around until that flat edge is running parallel with this red edge right here. So we'll just snap that in there like that, and that's good. And then we can hold Shift, click on the other green shape, and let's just duplicate both of those by hitting Control D. And we could flip that horizontally, and then just come over here and snap that onto those corners right there. And then let's click on the blue shape, and let's raise that to the top with this button right here. Raise selection to the top, and then press 1 on the keyboard to zoom back out to 100%. And click and drag over the entire thing, and bring the opacity all the way up. Click off of it to deselect. Let's turn off the Snap to Cusp Nodes. We're done with that for now. And we now have the shape of our ribbon. We now have to work on making it sort of like an outline like that. So let's click and drag over the entire thing and make it white. And then we're going to give it a black outline by holding Shift and clicking on the color black. Only it made it an entire mess right here, so it's way too big. So let's come over to the Stroke Style tab. I'm not sure if Inkscape does this for you, but for me it always defaults back to percentages as the unit of measurement. So if you see percentages here, just change that back to px, which is pixel. And once you've done that, I'm just going to put I'm going to make this like a 5 pixel stroke. See how that looks? We'll give this a rounded join and a rounded cap. 5, maybe 6. Let's see how that looks. No, I'll just go with 5. 5 is pretty good. And then we can click off of that to deselect everything. And let's zoom in on these objects right here. Let's just press plus on the keyboard to zoom in. You'll notice there's little white spaces in there. We can just click on that, turn that black. Click on that, turn that black. Same thing with these other shapes, just turn those black. We want that to be filled in a solid color. Press 1 on the keyboard to zoom back out. And you'll notice there's like a little bit of, there's like lines that I put around the ring here, just to add somewhat of an accent. So to create that, let's go back to our blue ring right here. Let's raise this to the top. And you know what? Let's duplicate this. Let's just hit Control D on the keyboard to duplicate that. And hold Shift and click on this white shape right here. Just make sure it's centered on the vertical axis. And then click off of it to deselect. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on just this blue ring. And I'm going to change the width of this to the same width that we used previously, which is 5. So just hit 5, hit Enter. And Then I'm going to duplicate that by hitting Control D on the keyboard, and I'm actually going to change this one to 15, so I'll add 10, just hit 15. And I'm going to change this to green by holding Shift and clicking on the color green. And I'll lower that one step so it goes beneath the blue ring. And then I'll duplicate that again by hitting Control D. And I'll add 10 to this one, so this will be 25. And this one will turn back to blue, so we'll just hold Shift and click on the color blue. We'll lower this 2 steps, 1, 2. And then that's pretty good. So let's click off of that to deselect everything, and let's just zoom in on this, on one of these edges right here. Again, pressing plus on the keyboard to do that. Let's click on the blue ring, the blue outer ring like that, and convert that to a path by going to Path, Stroke to Path. And then click on the green ring, convert that to a path as well by going to Path, Stroke to Path. And then hold Shift and click on that outer blue ring that we just converted to a path and go to Path, Difference. And then finally we can click on this middle blue ring right there and convert that to a path by going to Path, Stroke to Path. And then hold Shift and click on the other ring so we have them all selected and go to Path, Union. And we can press 1 on the keyboard to zoom back out to 100%. You'll see we have the shapes there ready to go. We just need to take out certain segments in order to finish it up. So let me zoom in on this a little more. See what I have here. Alright, so what we want to do now is let's click and drag over this entire thing and let's rotate it around. So let's click on it again to get back to the rotation handles. Hold Control and just rotate this around back to how we had originally, with these objects going straight vertically and straight horizontally like that. And then click off of that to deselect everything. Then we'll go back to the Squares and Rectangles tool, and I'm just going to click and drag and create a rectangle going over this section right here. I'm going to get rid of that outline by holding Shift and clicking the X. And I'll make this green, bring the opacity down in half, and go back to the Select tool so we can resize this. And you know what, let me just move this out of the way for now. Before I do that, I want to click on the white shape beneath this. So click on the blue object, and then hold Alt and click on it again so it grabs the white shape beneath it. And just hit Control D on the keyboard to duplicate that. And then hold Shift and click on the blue rings and go to Path, Intersection. Okay, so the next step would be let's take this our green object right here. Let's put this back up. Put that right about there like that. And we'll duplicate that by hitting Control D. We'll flip that around 90 degrees. Put this right here. Hold Shift, click on the blue lines, and just make sure it's centered on the horizontal axis. Click off it to deselect. And with this rectangle, we're going to click on that. And you know what? Let's rotate this around again. Let's click and drag over the whole thing. Click on it again to get the rotation handles. Hold Control and just rotate this around until this rectangle is going upright right there, and this rectangle is going horizontally right there. And then click off of it to deselect. Now we can click on this green rectangle, hold Shift, click on the blue shapes, center it on the horizontal axis. Just like that. And then let's go back to the Squares and Rectangles tool. I'm going to create a rectangle going over the edge of this blue shape right here. I'll duplicate that. Right click, duplicate, flip this around 90 degrees clockwise. Put that right about there like that. Maybe I'll move that in a little more. And what we're doing here with these green shapes, where they intersect with the blue shapes is where we're going to create those lines. So it's easier for me to show you than it is to explain it. So let me go back to, let's hold Shift and click on all of these green objects and go to Path, Union. And then hold Shift, click on the blue shapes, and go to Path, Intersection. And there you have that. So let's make that black. Let's bring the opacity of that all the way up. Let's click and drag over the whole thing. Click on it again to get the rotation handles. Hold Control and rotate it around until it's sitting upright like that. That's pretty good. Click off it to deselect everything, and we now have the ribbon right there. And it's fully colored in, so you can go and change the colors of this if you'd like. But what I'm going to show you how to do next, I'm going to show you how to make it transparent. If you notice, you'll see the background coming through the edges there. So I'm going to show you how to make that transparent right now. So let's put put that off to the side. Actually put that to the side. Let's duplicate this whole thing. Click and drag over the whole thing. Control D to duplicate, and hold Control and just click and drag this off to the left. And we'll bring the opacity of this whole thing down in half. And we'll go to Path, Stroke to Path, and click off it to deselect everything. And a whole bunch of stuff just happened there. So let me press plus on the keyboard a few times to zoom in. The first thing we want to do is click on our little triangles right here. These little individual triangles. Let's hold Shift and click on all of those and unify them all together by going to Path, Union. And we could fill them in by going to Path, break apart, and then Path, Union, and they're now filled in. And then we could take this object up here and just duplicate that by hitting Control D. And we can go to Path, Break Apart, Path, Union. And I'm just going to turn this red for the tutorial just so you can see the difference between that and everything else. And with that shape, I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate that again. And then hold Shift and click on that little series of triangles we just made, and go to Path, Difference. And then finally, we could take this red object right here, hold Shift, click on this object down here, and go to Path, Difference. Now we could zoom back out to 100% by pressing 1 on the keyboard. Click and drag over all of that, bring the opacity all the way up, and you could even group it together by clicking the group key up here. And then you notice you could change this to whatever color you'd like. And whatever background you put behind it will come through the background there. So you see, you could change the color and the background shows through. So you have the transparency there. Alright, and the final step would be putting some text around the edges of the banner there. So in order to do that, let's create a circle. Actually, let's grab our circle over here. Let's raise that to the top. Let's make this green and get rid of the blue outline by holding Shift and clicking on the X. Then we could hold Shift and click on this object right here, center it on the vertical axis. And I'm just going to click on this green object and just hold Control and Shift and scale it in about that much. And I'm going to put some text going here and here to start. So let's click off of that to deselect. We'll grab the text tool, click on the canvas, and I'm just going to write text. And I'm going to change the font. Go to the text editor tool. The font for this, I'm going to use something heavy so it shows Montserrat Ultra Bold. Something like that's pretty good. Let me go to the select tool. And I'm just going to hold Control and scale this down a little bit so it fits inside that banner right there. And what I could do now is I'm going to duplicate this by hitting Control D, and then I'm going to hold Shift and click on the green circle and go to Text, Put on Path. And now we can click off of that to deselect everything. If you see what happened right here, it took the text and put it on the path of the circle. So with everything deselected, we can now click on just the circle and then click on the circle again to get the rotation handles and just rotate it around and position that text right wherever you want it to be. Right about there. That's pretty good. And once you have it where you like it, you can just click on the text and go to Path, Object to Path, and that finalizes that. And we'll do this again for this object. I'm just going to hit Control D to duplicate that. Hold Shift, click on the green circle, go to Text, Put on Path, click off of it to deselect, then click on just the green circle, click on it again to get the rotation handles, rotate it around to this side. And actually, I want the top of these to line up with each other, so I'm just going to come up here to this little ruler, like these measurements up here, and you can just click and drag down and it creates a little horizontal guide for you. So I'm going to put this guide at the top of where the T is, and I'm just going to make sure that the top of this T is lined up with that horizontal guide. So that's close enough. So click off of that to deselect. I'm going to hover the cursor over that guide so it turns red, and once it turns red you can press delete on the keyboard and that gets rid of that. And what we want to do now is click on this text object and convert that to a path. To finalize that, go to Path, Object to Path. And finally we have to put the text down here. But instead of the text going outward, running along the outside of the circle, we want it running around the inside of the circle, otherwise it's going to be upside down. So to do that, I'm going to click on this green circle and hold Control and Shift and scale it out until it's the size of the text. If you notice the edge of the text, whereas the edge of the green circle is, we want that to be lined up like that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip that horizontally click the button that says flip that horizontally, and now Inkscape will know to put that on the inside of the green circle instead of the outside. So let's take this final text object, raise that to the top, hold shift, click on the green circle, and go to text, put on path. And it overlapped it with the other text, but you'll see here in a second. Let's click off of that to deselect and click on just the green circle. Click on it again for the rotation handles, and then rotate it around until it's down there. And again, the reason why we flipped it vertically is so that the text goes on the inside of the circle. If I flip that again horizontally, look, the text goes on the outside of the circle, and it's upside down and backwards. So we want to change that by flipping it horizontally, and that's pretty good. And I'm actually going to space the lettering of that out a little bit. I'll click on that, and I'll go to the text editor, text tool actually, and this icon right here, spacing between letters. I'm just going to increase the spacing between letters a little bit to better match these text objects. And that's good. We can go back to the select tool, click on the green circle, click it again for the rotation tool, rotation handles, and that's close enough. Click on just the text object, path, object to path. Click on the green circle, press delete on the keyboard because we're now done with that. Then we can press 1 to zoom back out to 100%. And there you have it. There's our circular ribbon or scroll, whatever you'd like to call it, using Inkscape. So if you have any questions, let me know. And as always, thank you for watching.